The law had been signed, and it could not be reversed. No prayer, no plea, no royal command could stop what was coming. As the guards opened the pit, the lions stirred in the darkness. Daniel stepped forward, and all of Babylon held its breath. This is the full story. Daniel had already lived through the unthinkable. He had been taken from his homeland as a youth when Jerusalem fell to Babylon. He had been brought into the court of a foreign king, trained in a foreign language, given a foreign name. Survival in that world usually meant adaptation, blending in, accepting the terms of the conqueror. Daniel had already shown that he would do some of that. He learned, he served, he rose, but not all of it. When the king's table was set before him, he would not eat from it. When the king's wine was poured, he would not drink it. The book says he resolved not to defile himself. That resolution would follow him all the way to the mouth of the pit. The book that bears his name says he refused to defile himself with the king's food and wine. He held to the practices of his faith even when it would have been easier to blend in. That refusal did not destroy him. It marked him. He became an interpreter of dreams. He served under more than one king. When the Babylonian Empire fell, power shifted to the Medes and the Persians. A new king, Darius, organized his realm into 120 provinces, each with its own governor. The machinery of empire required oversight. It required men the king could trust. Daniel had already proven he could be trusted under a different king in a different court in a different era. That was about to cost him everything. To keep those governors honest, he placed 3 chief officials over them. One of those 3 was Daniel. He had survived regime change. Now he rose so quickly and so cleanly that the king considered putting him in charge of the whole kingdom. Daniel's conduct was faultless. His accounts were straight. That was the problem. The other officials and the governors could find no corruption, no scandal, no lever to pull, so they chose another weapon: his faith.
They watched him. They knew his habit. 3 times a day he went to his house, opened his window toward Jerusalem, and prayed to his God. It was non-negotiable. The text says they could find no ground for complaint, so they manufactured one. They went to Darius with a proposal, not a law against treason or theft, a law about prayer. For 30 days, they said, "Let no one petition any god or man except you, O king. Anyone who disobeys goes into the lion's den." It sounded like loyalty. It sounded like honor. It flattered the king. He did not see the target. Darius signed it. The decree went out. From that moment, the fate of anyone who prayed to another god was sealed. And the men who had proposed the law knew exactly who would not stop praying. They did not have to wait long. Daniel did not wait for the 30 days to pass. He did not negotiate. He went home, opened his window toward Jerusalem, and prayed. The trap closed around him. And the king, who had thought he was signing a decree of loyalty, was about to lose the man he trusted most. In the ancient Near East, a royal decree, once issued, often could not be revoked, even by the king. The trap was set. Daniel knew it. He did not hide. He did not pray in secret. He went home. He opened his window. He prayed, as he had always done. What happened next would force the king to choose between his word and his favorite servant. The men rushed to the king. They reminded him of the decree. "Daniel," they said, "pays no attention to you. He still prays 3 times a day." Darius, when he understood, was shattered. He had been used. The text says that when the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He set his mind to deliver Daniel. He spent the rest of the day trying to find a way. There was none. The law was the law. The decree could not be changed. So the king gave the order. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. The text uses the same phrase that will later be used for his accusers. They brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. A stone was placed over the opening. The king sealed it with his own signet and the signets of his nobles so that nothing could be changed. Then he went back to his palace. He refused food. He refused music. No one slept. The story gives us no access to the pit. We do not see what Daniel saw in the dark. We do not see the lions. We only know that the king in his palace could not rest until the first light of dawn. The story does not say how many hours passed. It says that at break of day the king arose and went in haste to the den. He called out, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God been able to deliver you from the lions?" And from the dark came a voice, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths. They have not hurt me." Daniel was brought up. There was no wound on him. He had trusted his God, and the story says he was spared. The king then did what the law required of those who had accused an innocent man. The book says that those who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. The text does not soften what followed. The lions overpowered them and broke all their bones before they reached the bottom. The story does not linger. It moves on. Darius issued a new decree. After that, Darius wrote to every people and nation in his kingdom. He commanded that all should tremble before the God of Daniel, the God who delivers and rescues, who does signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Daniel prospered under Darius and under Cyrus the Persian who followed. His name would outlast the empires, but that was not the end of what the story would do. The tale is told in the book of Daniel in the Hebrew Bible. It sits in a section set in the courts of foreign kings. Scholars note that the figure of Darius the Mede is hard to match to a single known ruler in the historical record, and that the book took its current form in a later period, when Jewish communities were under pressure to hold to their identity and their worship. For those communities, Daniel was a model, a man who did not bend, who prayed when it was forbidden, who was thrown to the lions and in the telling was not destroyed. The story does not explain the mechanism of his deliverance. It does not describe the angel. It states the outcome. The lions did not harm him. The king had to live with what he had done and with the fact that the man he had cast into the pit was still alive when the stone was rolled away. The narrative does not promise that faith will always spare the body. It does not erase the reality of empires, decrees, and pits. It offers something else. A man in the dark, a choice to keep the window open, and a voice at dawn, O king, live forever. The details that can be verified come from the text itself. The court setting, the use of a lion's den as punishment, the irrevocability of royal decrees. These fit what we know of ancient Near Eastern practice. The rest belongs to the story as it has been passed down. If this journey into one of history's most enduring stories held your attention, like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the people and events that shaped the world. Daniel's legacy did not end in the den. It was read in synagogues. It was copied and translated. It crossed into other faiths and cultures. Rulers and artists returned to it. The faithful servant, the sealed pit, the angel in the dark. The story never claims that faithfulness guarantees escape. It claims that Daniel was faithful, and that in this case he was spared. The distinction matters. The same book would later show others who held to their faith and did not escape the fire or the sword. The lion's den is one moment in a longer narrative, but it is the moment that stuck. The man in the pit, the king at the mouth, the voice at dawn. The story asks what a person does when the law of the land forbids the practice of their conscience. It does not answer with a formula. It answers with a man who prayed anyway and a king who, too late, wished he had never signed the decree. That tension between power and integrity between the palace and the pit is why the story still lands. We are not told how long the night was. We are not told what Daniel felt in the silence. We are told that he came out, and that the king acknowledged the God who had delivered him. The narrative leaves the pit largely to the imagination. We hear the king's question. We hear Daniel's reply. We do not hear the lions. We do not see the angel. The text withholds as much as it reveals. That restraint is part of its power. The reader is left with the same uncertainty the king had carried through the night. And then the voice from the dark. What happened next would echo far beyond that single night. The decree that had been meant to destroy one man was turned into a proclamation. Darius sent word across his territories. The God of Daniel was to be feared. The one who had been cast into the pit was lifted out. The ones who had set the trap met the fate they had designed for him. The story does not hide the cost. It does not hide the violence of the den or the weight of the king's regret. It holds both: a sleepless night in the palace, a sealed stone, a voice answering at dawn. For centuries, readers have asked what it means to hold to a higher law when the law of the land demands the opposite. Daniel gives no speech about it. He simply goes home, opens the window, and prays. That image, the window toward Jerusalem, would outlive the empire. It would outlive every empire that followed. At the time, no one could have known how far the story would travel. It would be read in Aramaic and Hebrew, then in Greek, then in every language into which the scriptures were translated. It would appear in art and liturgy, in the mouths of preachers and the pages of commentaries. The figure of Daniel in the pit would become one of the most recognizable scenes in Western and Near Eastern tradition. Not because it promised safety, because it showed a man who would not close the window. The full story of Daniel in the lion's den is not merely a fable stripped of consequence. It is a man. It is a decree. It is a den. And it is a voice at the first light of dawn that changed how one king and countless readers since that day would remember the name of Daniel. The heavy stone was rolled away from the mouth of the pit, and the man who had been sealed in the darkness simply walked out. His accusers had meant to remove him, but instead, they had given the king a reason to proclaim the God they had tried to silence. The story does not end with a moral. It ends with Daniel prospering, and with a decree sent to every nation under the king's hand. And the story kept going. It is still going. That is the full story of Daniel in the lion's den. A stone, a pit, a voice at dawn, and a man who would not close the window.